Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Currently, I'm at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, which is a historical black college in Princess Anne, a city called Princess Anne, Maryland. And you guys can't see what I see, but you know, they usually state that the historical black colleges are underfunded and like this. But this place is looking pretty nice, mashallah. Let me flip the camera around. You guys can see what I see. And it's looking pretty nice out here, mashallah. It's a Saturday, so it's empty. You know, no school today. But pretty nice. At any rate, that brings me to the point of why I'm here. And I think the best way to start off this discussion would be with the principle إذا تعارضت المصلحة والمفسدة قدم أرجحهما. That if a maslaha, yani something that is beneficial, that's what it was normally translated as. Some people translate it as pro, but something that's beneficial, for the betterment of the well-being of the Muslims and like this. But if a beneficial matter and a harmful or corrupt matter, if they're rivaling each other, they give precedence to that which is more preponderant. Give preference to that which is more preponderant. And so, this particular principle, I'll explain it briefly, and then I'll go into why I'm saying what I'm saying. That this is dealing with a situation and or circumstance if that there's a situation or circumstance where, you know, both you're trying to accomplish something, but there lies within that issue both a maslaha and a mafsada. They're rivaling each other. So in this particular situation, you have to weigh and assess what is more preponderant, the harm or the benefit. If the benefit is more preponderant, then you embark upon that thing that you're trying to do. But if the mafsada or the harm is more preponderant, then you leave it off. You leave it off because you don't want to create you don't want to achieve a mafsada, a grave and great mafsada. You only want to achieve maslaha. So at any rate, an example of this is what I'm about. The purpose and the point of the video that I'm doing now would be an example of this. In the early 2000s, we had brothers that would advise, or let me say this, there were fatwa that were out on the internet about the impermissibility of going to universities, studying at the universities because of the harms that were found at these universities as it relates to mixed gender classes. That was usually the fatwa that was seen, and the reason for stating that it was not permissible to study at these particular universities. At any rate, some, especially in the early 2000s, some, I will actually say many, adhered to these particular fatwa and did not obtain, education and thus forth and so on. This education and credentials would have enabled them to be able to be placed in positions where they could have made money that would have been of benefit for themselves as it relates to providing for a family, and other than that, providing for a family, and also helping with providing or helping the community as it relates to donating to the needs of the community and thus forth and so on. Like we see many in immigrant communities where people are educated commonly do, that they donate large amounts of money to their community, to their masajid, and we see that they have some well taken care of masajid in those communities. At any rate, because I don't want to be too long-winded, and I know I can easily become real long-winded, the point that I'm making is that when those particular fatwa were widespread, and they could probably still be found online. You can go to salafitalk.net, I believe, and some of those fatwa are still there. But I want to just mention that I don't believe that those fatwa, one, addressed the total circumstance and the situation of Muslims here in the West. That's one. And then I don't believe that they addressed the total circumstance of what's taking place here in America as it relates to providing, a livelihood for oneself and how to go about, or the means to go about doing that here in the U.S. The reality is this, that in this day and time where the cost of living is definitely becoming more and more expensive in the States, and thus forth and so on, that in order for a person to be able to actually acquire a livelihood that will suffice him, that will be a means to suffice him as it relates to providing for a family and thus forth and so on, then he has to get some type of credential. He has to make himself marketable. And that's usually by way of going to a university, getting an associate's degree that's marketable, or a bachelor's degree that is marketable. A high school diploma is not sufficient. And if you are technically a high school dropout, the situation may be even a little bit harder. You have some people that go to trade schools, but everybody's doesn't have the capacity to, or the propensity to, acquire a trade and that's what for so on. And so the main point that I'm making is that one of the major ways that a person makes himself marketable here in the U.S. is by acquiring one of these types of degrees. A marketable degree, engineering, or something that will enable an individual to work in the medical field where where they can earn a well over a sufficient amount of money to be able to provide for a family, or two or three. In fact, if I was to be honest, most of the brothers that I know that have more than one wife, that are not falling into what brothers or people in the society called struggle love, are people who are educated. I knew a brother who had 3 wives. He was an internal medicine. He was a doctor of internal medicine, excuse me. So he had credentials. I know other brothers that have trades that, these are not light trades. They make some real money off the trades that the credentials that they've acquired. The point that I'm making is, going back to that principle, is there a mafsada with going to the schools? Without a doubt, there's a mafsada because of the prohibition of mixed gender schools and thus forth and so on. So that would be the mafsada, that which could occur from being in this type of environment. But I would say that the maslaha outweighs the mafsada. And the reason why I say that is because a person studying at this university, first and foremost, to go to the university, you may not necessarily have to be in a actual classroom anyway. A lot of credits could be taken online. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that the type of credential that you may be going after necessitates that you looked like I had a spider web on me, right? It necessitates that you have to be in class. Then I would say that in that particular circumstance, the maslaha, and Allah knows best, outweighs the mafsada. Why? Because your class study is temporal. Depending on what you're going after. For instance, if a person wants to become a registered nurse, it only takes 2 years of study and an associate's degree to become a registered nurse. A job that a person would experience earns $100,000 or more. especially depending on what state you're in. I think that's one of those jobs where they start off around 65 or 75,000 a year, but the potential to make 100,000 after experience is is undeniable. You have registered nurses that are making $100,000 a year, and especially considering the fact that there's a shortage of nurses, and there's even a shortage of male nurses. So this type of credential would enable a person to not only be able to provide for one family, but possibly more than one family. The point that I'm making is the mafsada that is attached to it is temporal, but the maslaha that's attached to it, that credential you'll have with you for the rest of your life, and it'll open up the doors for you to be able to, like I said, provide for a family and assist your community financially. Something that masajid in the inner city are lacking. The masajid in the inner city suffer from lack of funds, and that's usually because the people within the inner city communities, would be considered the working class poor. Working jobs that are basically, making probably between 30 to 40,000 a year, which is statistically proven to be basically a person living from paycheck to paycheck. That's just the reality. So the point that I'm making is that because I know there was brothers, especially in the early 2000s when these fatwa were being promoted heavily, there were brothers that were having a crisis of conscience because they know they had to get some type of credential, to be able to earn money for the purpose of, getting married. And other than that, to make Hajj, it takes money. To make Umrah, it takes money. And other than that, from the Islamic responsibilities that a person may have on them. So you have brothers that wanted to go that route, but because of the fatwa that were being promoted at that time, they didn't, and they had a what you call a crisis of conscience when looking at that particular issue, and strayed away from it. And so the reality is this: when looking at this particular mas'ala, it can't be looked at from a one-dimensional perspective. It has to be looked at considering all factors that are attached. Here in the U.S., it's becoming more and more expensive to live, right? And what people would call unskilled labor jobs are not viable they're not really viable for a person that wants to raise a family. It'll literally have a person living paycheck to paycheck. And the sad reality is, for people that promoted these fatwa in the early 2000s, a lot of them defied the fatwa. And I'm talking about du'at now. A lot of them defied these fatwa and became educated. I even had a conversation with one particular da'i that stated that one of the ulama, and he mentioned to me that there was a group of brothers in a setting with this particular scholar, and he told them that for the condition of the brothers and sisters in the U.S. specifically, he said that it would be no way that he would tell people to stay away from going to the universities, considering our situation over here as it relates to us going through our school system and mixed intergenders classes from knee high all the way to high school. That being one, and then two, knowing the fact that this is the only way to enable you to get those types of credentials, or this is one of the only ways to enable you to get those credentials. And the reason why I say one of the only ways is because, again, if you can get your credits without going into a classroom, then that is the best way to go. But if you cannot get your credits except by going into a mixed intergender class, then you have to fare a lot in accordance with your ability. You have to fare a lot in accordance with your ability. Because selling incense and oils on the corner is not going to cut it. You're not going to be able to raise a family selling incense and oils like a lot of brothers do. You know, attempting to street hustle a lot of times is not going to do it. You know, and so, but if a person had a credential, like for instance, a person was an engineer. Like I remember one particular brother from Jordan or Urdun, he told me that his father made him go to the university, and not only made him go, but told him what he was going to major in. Told him what he was going to major in engineering. And he was telling me this as an engineer, being thankful that his father made him do that. A lot of times when we come to the inner cities amongst Black Americans, Muslim or non-Muslim, you know, we expect our children to have all of this figured out already. Go to college or university and already have figured out what they want to do with their life at age 17, 18, or 19. I mean, let's be honest, that's far-fetched to expect that our children would know and have a roadmap on what they want to do with their life at that young of an age. And so sometimes it takes the parents to step in and say, okay, if you're going to go to the university, you're going to study this, to ensure that they become marketable. To ensure that they become marketable. The main point that I'm making is that in a circumstance outside of what we're dealing with here in the U.S., especially like if you're in Saudi Arabia, for instance, it would be totally impermissible to go to one of those mixed gender schools. But we have to recognize that here, being in America, we're under we have a different circumstance here. And this is when we have to apply those principles to ensure that that we're in accordance, that we're doing things that bring about positive incomes within our personal life and within our communities in general. Within our personal lives and within our communities in general. We have to weigh the masalih and the mafasid. And it can't be that we just import fatwa from Yemen or from Saudi and attempt to apply them here as if the circumstance that's taking place here is identical to what's going on in Saudi or in Yemen or in Egypt or Algeria or some other place. This is ridiculous, and this is what's going to hold us back. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of the masajid within the inner cities are underfunded, because the attendees don't have money, and a lot of times it's because we don't have credentials, the type of education that enables us to get a job, that causes us to make the type of money that won't have us living paycheck to paycheck, that actually suffices our needs each month. All we have to do is look at the masajid in the suburban areas, where it's mainly immigrant populations and the people are well educated. Their masjids are some of the most well-funded masajid here in the U.S. And then they're not suffering from this dilemma of people not having the financial means to be able to support the masajid. They're not suffering from this dilemma. In fact, some of them have some real beautiful and immaculate looking masajid. So anyway, we have to make ourselves marketable for those varying reasons. We have to make ourselves marketable, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. I hope I expressed everything that I wanted to express as it relates to dealing with our circumstance over here, and didn't shortcut in any way whatsoever. I know I could be long-winded, but I hope I was able to express clearly what I was saying. The maslaha, as far as I'm concerned, we're in the circumstance here in the U.S. that differs with Saudi or Yemen and like this, so we have to keep that in consideration. And then two, entering into these universities, the maslaha outweighs the mafsada as far as I'm concerned. Now you may go back to another da'i and he may have a different opinion. But that's my opinion, and I'm standing on that. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. Waffaqana Allahu wa iyyakum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.